Okay, so just a heads up, we are recording the webinar now. Welcome again. Good afternoon. This is probably our final get together, unless something comes up, for a webinar for the 21-22 program year. And the purpose of what we're here for today, of course, is mostly to review and discuss those things that are most important to keep in mind for this, roughly this time of the program year, the end of 21-22 in this case. There'll be some time for some questions later. So I'm going to go through and really go through kind of a presentation. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or I'll pause a couple moments here and there for questions as well. We certainly want your feedback if there's anything that is not clear. After I go through some of the planned talking points today, Steve will present a demonstration of some of the new features in version 3 of the template. The demonstration is probably just going to be a quick review, not necessarily exhaustive, but if there's any of you that are especially curious about version 3 of the template, and I'll talk about more details about that soon. If there's any of you especially curious, feel free to stay on at the conclusion of the meeting. We won't keep all of you with that, but if you want to stay on, if you have that time, you're welcome to do so. All right, so again, welcome. It's good to see everybody. We've got a nice crowd here this morning, and we're going to give you some information that hopefully helps you and gives you some reminders for ending the year as smoothly as can be expected. Of course, you'll notice on this slide, we'll talk a little bit about some timing for template version 3 in addition to those end of year topics. Without any further ado, let's just talk about template version 3. It's coming soon. We have those new items that many of you are aware of now that we've posted the update to the eData website, new items being the new tab on the adult records. So many of you may have noticed there's an MSG post-secondary attainment tab. More instructions for that are coming tomorrow during the division webinar. And that will be mostly pertaining, of course, to those of you that have specific programming like an IET, for example. So we waited until those features were made available in eData to do version 3 of the template. And Deb, I see you have a hand. Do you have a question?
Yes. Karen Hamilton's unable to get in. It says she's waiting to be let in.
I let everybody in so far.
Yeah, maybe if she tries to sign out and sign back in, that might give that a shot, and Steve will keep an eye out for her.
Mm-hmm.
So template 3 contains new fields, new queries actually, for all of those new outcomes that are being tracked. And if I'm saying something you're not familiar with, it may just be that you don't have that programming, so have no fear, no big deal. But that explains the timing of why version 3 is coming out now. And as you can see on the screen, we're going to post it on the website. We'll release the version 3 notes along with the heads up that it's available. So again, should be soon, I would say within the week, we hope. And we've got some new queries on the reports and reports 2 page that'll have some new functions for you. And also some new options in how the reports by class group on the class group reporting page works. Also, the new, again here, that last bullet point, you can see the new measurable skills gain and post-secondary credential attainment queries. Those will be on the front page, what we call sort of like the main form. And they'll function just like everything else. When you press on adults, you see all your adults. You press on classes, you see classes. In this case, any goals that you've entered, you'll see your MSGs and your post-secondary credentials. So that'll be some new stuff we have. And this should be the final release of the template for this program year. Remember, of course, and I'll provide this reminder in the email as well, remember that when you get the new template, if you are currently using the performance reports function, you will want to back those up from your current template, which should be version 2. And then when you get version 3 up and running and have data in it, you'll restore in version 3 the data that you'll have set aside in your documents folder from version 2. If any of that's confusing, of course, just give us a call and tech support and we can walk you through that process. Just a heads up. And you can always keep that version 3 template that you have with your performance reports as a backup file, just in case something happens with version 3. As for end of year timelines, many of you are likely aware of these dates, but it's always a good idea, I think, just to kind of discuss them and answer any questions or concerns you may have with them. Of course, this program year ends June 30th, officially on the calendar, but because of the 2-week allowance for data entry that the division provides, the system, the eData system, will be open until July 15th. As of July 15th, close of business, eData will close and will no longer be available for data entry, nor will it be available for any access at all. You won't be able to go in and even get in there to download any kind of export or view material. So it doesn't even just turn to read only. It actually just shuts down to agency access completely. Also, we're currently working on the forms for next year. Those forms will be available. We're shooting for July 1st. Shouldn't be all forms but one. We pretty much got squared away. One, we're just working on some new special program types for classes, groups, and pairs. And when it comes time to announce some of those changes for next year's data system, we'll announce those closer to the opening date of eData next year. But just count if you have any intakes or orientations planned for July 1st or later. Just be aware that the forms specific to next year will be available, should be available July 1st. If there's some sort of delay, we'll let you know. Also remember that the data check report will go out again the first Monday in July. That's just our routine, so that's no change there, but that will be the final data check of the year. And we're going to talk about data checks here in a little bit, but the encouragement from us would be, of course, to pay special mind to that July data check and really try to work through closing up any loose ends that you may have once you get that data check in July. Of course, you can run those data checks locally and resolve those at any time. You don't have to wait for us. You just may get a call from your advisor, that final data check if they want to check in on things, and that's normal. Sometimes advisors will check in on data checks also. So really nothing special, just a little sense of urgency, I suppose, with the fact that July's data check in the email is going to be the last one of the year. And then, of course, yes.
There's a question in the chat. Are there any changes on the intake for 22-23?
Thank you, Steve. No, not at this time. Ultimately, we just changed the dates on it. There's no new fields for the students on that form. The only change, the adult record for next year that we have planned, and I say planned because there is still time before the data system opens next year. But as of today, June 15th, the only system change that we have, you're already aware of because you can see those new a new IET MSG tab in the system. And the documentation for this year, such as the system manual glossary, does not have, of course, any commentary on that yet because the edition is brand new, but we will have updated documentation in the system manual glossary for that new feature when the eData system opens next year. But as of now, Paula, there's no changes at all planned to the intake. And lastly here, data validation, of course, is the process that you would use at the agency level to go in and look at your data, give it a final once over, and verify that it is indeed complete and accurate. Some reminders for this coming close of eData this year. All completed intakes from any time between July 1st all the way through June 30th of this month should be added to eData. Those students are reportable and they should be added to the system. if you have something like an orientation on June 30th and you do have intakes from that day, we would certainly encourage you to enter those in the system as soon as you can. That way, of course, if you run into a near match or something, you have time to resolve that and finish any data entry you have before July 15th. We just want to allow for as much as possible to be finished that first week in July, so that if there's any delays or bugs or anything that we encounter, of course, we're giving ourselves all a little buffer. So those things to do, those loose ends I mentioned earlier, include all near matches and all adult record deletion requests. Typically speaking, we're not going to delete adult records unless there's some kind of serious error, because if you had the information from an intake to add an adult record, generally speaking, that record should stay in the system. And just as a sort of a word of encouragement, those items, I mean, a student that goes in with an intake only and just sits there, it really doesn't hurt anything. That student just sits there. Many of the reports in the template require enrollment for the student to show up on those reports. So those students don't even impact your enrollment summary or table 4s, for example. So important to get those all in there and resolve any near matches or other issues that you have. A couple of reminders that I kind of tie back to what I said earlier, which is the reminders to save a copy of exported data from eData. So when you click export data from eData and you get that file called extractreport.zip, that zip folder, it may not be a bad idea to just download that folder when you're finished with all of your data entry, rename the folder itself, the file. I should keep saying folder, it's a file. Rename the file and put it in a folder somewhere. And you could rename it 22, 21, 22 data, something like that, whatever works for you, whatever you'll remember. And having that zipped file with all of your export tables in it will be potentially very helpful in the future, especially when eData is not available. And that's where that second bullet points. The second save a copy says, save a copy of a populated template, simply because having the template, say you get version 3 from us here within a week, you populate it, July 10th, you're done with your data. Then in August 10th, if you need to look at something from this current program year that we're in, you'll be able to do so using that populated template. So having those available to you could be really useful depending on questions you may have of your data, which a couple of those specific questions I'll cover here in a minute. So question 2 looks like, is the changes, so I mentioned earlier, this ties back to the intakes. Is the intake, the lack of changes on the intake, the same for family literacy forms like child maintenance? Yes, as of this time, there are no changes. The updated form that you would want to certainly focus on every year is the family form, because it has updated income numbers. The federal government releases new ranges for the poverty guidelines based on family size. So we update those numbers both in eData and on the forms every year. So you'll want to make sure to keep an eye out for those. That's an annual change, so it's probably something you're used to, but that's the most notable thing this year. Nothing else is really changing. And so just a final reminder on this slide, eData closes, of course, at close of business on July 15th. So assume 5 p.m. is a close of business time, and assume that you will not be able to get into eData after 5 p.m. on July 15th. All right, so before I move on to any other slides, feel free to unmute yourself if you need to. Any questions so far, just about dates or just general tips for the end of the year? Okay, yeah, and really so far, I don't think I've mentioned anything that's probably a great surprise to any of you that have been through the eData system end of year process before. The biggest change may be that this is only, I think, the second year. It's either the second or third year that we've done the closing on July 15th as opposed to the end of the month. So that's probably the biggest change. Those of you who are more experienced with eData may be in the middle of. We have a few more things to think about. And some of these tips are things you hear us say every year. Some of these tips are really taking into account and thinking about, we sat down and we thought, what are some things that folks call us about in July and August and September that seemed like it would be good for them to have known or have thought more about back right now in June, when we can take more action. In September, when you're entering things after the eData system opens, sometimes you forget. So there's some details in here that are not just about things to think about before the 15th, but things to prepare for next year. So we'll get into that with these reminders. So first of all, of course, do not exit all of your adults. Only exit those adults who have actually left your program. And a handy tool for that is to look in the template under the program, or excuse me, the data checking page. At the top, there is a query that says adults with 0 instructional hours in XX days. And the XX is user defined. You can say 60 days or 90 days. Those are the default options in the dropdown, or you can type in your own figure. And sometimes that's useful because if you do have students that you have not seen for more than 90 days, you can give those an exit date. Because of course, if nothing else, even if they return next year, they've gone past their period of participation date. But don't just buy, I don't think anybody does this anymore, fortunately, but don't go through and give all your students exit dates. Second, check and update staff years of experience. This has been a focus that the division has wanted agencies to really be careful with. It is a reporting standard per the NRS. So it is something that the federal government does look at among the many tables for the adults that you serve. They also look at some things like staff records. And years of service, years of experience specifically, are very important to document. And so if you just do a short pass going through your staff records and just make sure that the field that says years of experience is completed in full and is accurate for all of your staff as of this year. Also, check for the correct county in adult records. We did a little data quality review. Sometimes we just kind of pick random things to just check from time to time. And upon closer examination, it appeared that some agencies had adults marked in counties that were pretty far away from the physical space where these agencies were located. That, of course, may not be an error. There are different things that go into all kinds of programming. And of course, there is remote programming as well. But just as the staff records, if you could go through the adult records and ensure you have the correct county marked, that would also be very helpful for reporting purposes. In general, you also want to review your data checks. So going back to what I mentioned earlier about those July data checks that we'll be sending to you in email, there's the data check that you can run, the summary report on the data checking page at any time in the template. And those data checking items are really helpful because they can guide your hand into looking at specific things that may be one of two, in general, fall into one of two categories. Sometimes you can see on the bullet point, we want to solve errors versus document quirks. So many data check items fall into one of two categories. Sometimes it's just a flat out error, something that you missed. There's hours missing, or you put remote hours inadvertently in a class that should have all in-person hours. Those things you go through, you find them, you fix them. That's the solution. We solve the errors part. Sometimes though, when we say document quirks, what we mean is, to use the same example of an in-person class, sometimes you may, based on how your agency administers assessments, you may have the assessments administered remotely. And thus, assessment hours for an in-person class, if that's the only class that student is in, may be given remotely. And that would be an honest, correct entry of attendance, because in that situation, those specific hours were remote, even though the student's hours in class are in person. That would be a case where you would just see that as an item on the data check, document it for future reference in case somebody asks, what's going on here? Why are these hours here for this in-person class? And then move on. It's going to continue to show up in your data checks because of course the data won't change, but you've taken care of it by documenting it and being aware of it and just ensuring that it is correct. Adult ed is very diverse. It's become more, the activities are more creative. You're working with students in different ways. There's a lot more variables than there were even 3 years ago. So the data checks have evolved to reflect that. And there's more what I'll call triggers that may cause things to be a data check. That doesn't mean everything that you see you have to fix until your data check is blank and all zeros. That's frankly not even realistic. You're going to have some data check items that are just quirks, a reflection of something interesting. And as long as what's in eData accurately reflects what's in the real world, then you're good. So just some things to think about. And one issue that we noticed, and Steve had encountered this a couple of times as well, was that there seemed to be some additional issues in the data checks when there is a shared adult record. So that means someone that you share with another agency. And that may be that you have a data check item that says you're missing X. You go in the system and you see, wait a second, the student isn't missing X. It may be that the other agency has not marked that record that you share with whatever X is, maybe mark them as a distance learner or whatever it is. So there may be a situation where if you see something and it looks correct, just peek at the top of that student's record and see if they're shared. It may be that your side of the documentation is correct, but the shared agency needs to take some sort of action. And there's not a whole lot we can do about that. It's just a quirk when two agencies are editing essentially shared parts of the same record. So that was a lot going on just in this single slide. Before I move on to the next one, which has a few more ideas, any questions or thoughts on those items? Okay. So the next part is really coming back to the previous comment I made about looking ahead to next year, planning in ways that you might prevent some frustration next year where you'd say, oh, geez, I wish we knew we missed this and now we're not going to have. So what I'm thinking about here is assessments and assessment timing. If you have and anticipate some students, of course, will either continue or return to you next year. Continuing just means that as of July 1, they're still a student and they literally just continue into next year. Returning, of course, means that they will have a gap of more than 90 days somewhere, but eventually return to you next year. Either way, when you enter that student in the system next year, you know that, of course, you'll need a pre-test for that student to have meet enrollment criteria. You need the pre-test and the 12 hours for enrollment. Sometimes, based on timing, agencies will discover that they entered a student on July 1st who was a continuing student, and they realize in September when the system's open, oh wait, their test that we thought we had for them was too old. We can't roll it over. And now that it's September, and we haven't given them a test, we don't have a test to enter in the system within 30 days of their start date, we're stuck. So in the interest of hoping to prevent that, the idea here is that we just wanted to give you a couple of pointers to think of going into next year. Now, you're all very different agencies. You run your assessments and your students and your orientations all in somewhat unique ways. So it's hard to give a catch-all solution for this, but the idea is just to be aware that if you have students whose assessment is sometime in February and you're starting them July 1st, right around somewhere mid-February, that's the 150-day mark between July 1st and February. And so any assessments that you think a student has now may not be available to you as a rollover when the student starts next program year. So what does that mean? Probably we would just suggest that you might want to just consider keeping an eye on those students. And if they do return next year, continue or return, to consider assessing them as appropriate, of course, based on guidelines and publishers' recommendations. Consider giving them an assessment sometime when they return in the summer, so you have a valid assessment within 30 days of their start date of 22-23. And that could be done just creating lists, looking at student test dates. There's different ways, filters, sorts that you can do in some of the queries in the template that are the data sheet style queries. So the ones that look like an Excel spreadsheet where you can sort by date and just get a sense of who might you want to keep an eye on. Probably not all your students. Those who just took an assessment in June aren't going to have this issue, but just ones that are sitting on assessments that are about 150 days older or more right now are ones you might want to keep an eye on. Any questions or thoughts on that? Okay, so I think we'll just segue now into just sort of a general question and answer. Oh, and I think I see just the first one of those here in the chat. So I'll read this out loud in case you're joining us by phone. Are you saying that if the last test given was within 150 days of the student's return day and eligible for rollover, but is outside the 150-day window when eData opens up in September, it can't be rolled over? No. If that was confusing, no, this is the date of the test and the date of the student start date are the 2 days that matter when it comes to the 150-day calculation. My mentioning of September is merely to create a scenario in your mind where you would be sitting at a time where you would be doing data entry, potentially discover someone's start date, let's say it's July 1st, and test date, let's say it's January 26th, or greater than 150 days apart. The mention of September was more to illustrate there's nothing you could do at that point. You've already passed the 30-day mark after their start date, where you could actually administer an assessment that would be valid for the program year. So that's where that came in. So thank you for that question to let us clarify. And then another on the adult details page, the last two questions, special needs and PA Career Link referral, both yes or no questions. After these have been entered and saved, sometimes they return to blanks as if they have not been answered. That is new to me. I haven't heard about that. What I would say, is this Barb? I see BG as the initial. So whoever this is, if it's Barb, feel free to send us an email to the departmental email with the record in question and what the settings should be. So you can just let us know it's the student's name and say PA Career Link should be yes, the special needs should be no, and send us the name, and we'll go into eData and look and maybe even test and see if we can duplicate that issue. If we can, then we will be able to report that as a bug. So thanks for letting us know.
Yeah, this has happened on multiple people. I've been doing a data check to make sure what's on our intake form matches what's on the adult detail page.
Okay.
And it's been many times. And the reason I know that this is an issue is because there have been some that I know I entered, and I know I entered either yes or no. And then when I go back into it, doing the data check, it's like, it's not there. The yes or no are blank again.
Okay. Yeah, if you could send us specific, if you have more than one name, more samples would be better. What we typically do when we hear of an issue like the one you're reporting, Barb, is we'll try to duplicate it. And so if we can do it, and we can try in a testing site, but if you have real world examples and you tell me that student A should be yes, no, student B should be no, no, student C would be yes, yes, and we know the combinations of those, then we can go in and first verify if it is or isn't displaying properly. If it isn't, and you've told me what it should be, I can just put it in the production site, is what we call the main site for eData, and test it out and see what happens to us. And if we can duplicate it then that turns into a bug report. We let the IT folks know and they take it from there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we have a question that says, I missed due to some technical issues. Somebody's joining us late and said, will eData open again in September? No, I guess I shouldn't have mentioned the month September. No, we have no crystal ball in terms of how things may look for the opening of the eData system for next year. That is something that as the summer proceeds, we will have announcements as we know more. I literally have no information as to when the eData system will open for 22-23. We all know, of course, it's a competitive grant year. So there's things that need processed at the state level and grants have to get to a certain point before eData opens. So as that process unfolds and as everyone who's involved in it knows more, we will let you know as we know. And then question, where can I find the data validation form? That should be something that if you check the division guidelines, that should have information about the form. And if you have specific questions about the form, because those go to your division advisor and it is a reporting form for the division, questions about the form should be directed to your advisor. If you have questions about how to gather data for the form, you can certainly let us know because there are, as many of you already are aware, there are specific data validation reports in the Access template that function to be able to provide you the numbers that you need to fill out those forms.
Michael,
Yes, Bruce.
I have a question about, I know we're not exiting students, but should we go through all like continuing records and look at outcomes? I guess the question specifically is students who have retained employment, should we mark that as a met outcome, employment outcome? You know what I mean? Like, is there anything we should be doing with outcomes and putting in dates for continuing students?
So your core and your secondary outcomes as they exist within the outcomes tab in eData there's a couple thoughts for that. Yes, the short answer to your question, Ruth, is yes. And what we would always say as a foundation for everything that we would do is if it's something that you have documentation of in the real world, you should put that, if it's available as a field in eData, you should put that in eData. So it should be really one and the same. By the end of the year, what information you have in your students, be it employment or post-secondary work, or if they, of course, obtained the secondary school, any of those core outcomes, if you have that information that you could specifically fill in those core outcomes, absolutely do so. And of course, secondary outcomes for some of you are required depending on the specifics of your contracted programming. So that is always a good thing to review at the end of the year to be sure that those are in place as needed. Do know that one key aspect of employment reporting, though, actually comes from the labor and industry database outside of eData. So when it comes to verifying the reporting that you do of your students' employment, that will come from the labor and industry database. So one thing, the reason I would even mention that is so that you know that a critical component of that can sometimes be correct social security number. Because for the statistician that does the data match, to find and reference your students in a different database, typically speaking, that's the unique identifying number for your student is their social security number. So to verify employment, not only is it important for you to track your goals, but it's almost equally as important, of course, to make sure that you have student information like social security numbers complete and correct, because those are critical components for the statistician to be able to go and actually find your student and verify that employment that you've indicated in eData.
Very specifically, though,
Yes.
is retain employment worth entering a met date for continuing students? I ask this because we find that like when data is finalized and comes back to us,
Mhm.
I know there's a lot of factors, but our outcomes always seem low to me. And I wonder, are we not capturing? So,
Well, the numbers, do you mean the numbers that you get for review about a year or 6 months to
Yeah.
a year after? Yeah, so those numbers that you get
are the data match
are
numbers?
the data match numbers, which almost exclusively will come from the labor and industry database.
Right.
So I don't want to diminish the importance of you tracking the outcomes in eData because that is important. But frankly, that is really more for agency use than official NRS reporting. And so if you, by looking at the guidelines and what's in the manual glossary, feel that a student's accomplishment in their employment meets the criteria of that core goal, in this case, employment, and you have a date and a specific employer to enter in the core outcomes fields in eData, please do so. Because there is, if nothing else, there is a benefit as an agency for you to be able to run the core outcomes reports and see which students may have fallen into that criteria when you do get that report 6 months from now and you're asked to verify that those numbers are correct. If you don't have those numbers from tracking on the tracking you've done, it may be harder to figure out where any gaps are or why there's a gap in the first place.
Okay.
But
All right.
But I will say this, you could be perfect with that and the numbers would still differ, because if you had 10 students who would be in that cohort, but they didn't have a social, and something happened where those 10 students were not able to be identified in the labor industry database, you would then lose or have 10 less on that report that you see later, because if those cannot be validated in labor and industry, they cannot be counted as an outcome.
Okay.
So I don't want to get too much into the weeds with the reporting and the differences, but I think anytime we're talking about documenting specific things like outcomes in eData, it probably is worth saying that there is no, so I guess I just want to make it clear to everyone that if you put in 50 student outcomes in eData for employment, you won't necessarily see 50 as a number when you get that report from the division 6 months from now. There are additional layers and steps where if there's a gap, the numbers are going to be different. And I think the most important thing is for you to know just maybe why, because that'll help you be able to have a more informed response if you're asked why are these numbers different. And when that kind of thing comes up, say it's January of 2023 and you get a report and you see employment numbers in that report that are different than what you had, feel free to give us a call. We can certainly look through your numbers and what was entered in eData. We may not actually be able to know because we don't do the statistical analysis, but we can certainly have a conversation about that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hopefully ultimately that did address your question, Ruth.
There's something in the chat, Michael, about the conversation.
Yes, I see somebody kindly posted the link, the data validation form. So thank you for that. Well, so there's a comment now. It looks like there's a follow-up comment. I always thought that they didn't even look at those outcomes unless the student left the program. And this comes back to really kind of, we're starting to talk about a little bit about policy and how policy ties to what specifically qualifies an individual to be in specific outcome cohorts. And so I don't want to, again, I'm reluctant to get too much in the weeds with that because it's more of a division discussion. But what I'll say is if you check the guidelines, you'll see that for each of the core outcomes, there are cohorts defined and there are definitions for each specific outcome, let's say employment. And generally speaking, one of the requirements to be put in an outcome cohort is to be exited from the program in the given year in which that core outcome is evaluated. So there are criteria. And I say that with just keeping it sort of in a general sense. If you have specific questions of that, of course, ask your advisor. But none of that, I think the important thing that I would say, since we're speaking more from the eData perspective, is none of that takes away from the importance of you as an agency documenting the progress of your students. So just because they're not going to have an exit date potentially, and you think they're not going to count as a core outcome, I would strongly discourage you from saying, okay, well, that means we don't have to worry about it because this isn't going to be an outcome. You never know what's going to happen with a student. They may exit. We were sitting here June 15th. If they disappear and something comes up in their life tomorrow, they potentially would have an exit date. That's evaluated by the statistician later. So the key is to control what you can control and to document everything as thoroughly as you can. That's really the number one thing as far as a data entry perspective and an eData perspective that's going to support your agency in getting credit for the outcomes that you have, in the outcomes that you and your adults have achieved. So really, details aside, the message I would say is just encourage you to document those as thoroughly as you can, and that will have its benefits. All right, very good questions. Any other questions, comments, concerns? And then we're going to probably segue into a little quick version 3 demo. All right, so what I'll do is I'm going to stop my share. That's going to allow Steve, he's going to step in and take over, and he's going to share with us the version 3 and some small changes there. So nothing groundbreaking. If you have time, you're more than welcome to stay. And the idea then is I'll hang on after that. If there are questions, I know some folks prefer to not ask a question in front of a whole big group. We'll hang on after Steve's done with his demonstration here, and we can have a further discussion at that time. So Steve, take it away.
Okay, can you see the eData access template?
Yes.
Okay, so just a couple of changes we added on the main page here. We added 2 new buttons over here under adult. They are the measurable skill gain and the post-secondary credential attainment. And they are very straightforward. They're empty now because I'm in a small database scrubbed, but they run very much like all the other ones here. And then to make room for these 2 buttons, I moved class assignments up under class, and I moved group assignments under group. So this should look very, very much the same, just it grew a little bit over here. So in addition, on the reports page, I added 2 new reports on the lower right bottom under assessments. We have the EFL gain in untracked subject, which shows gains in the not highlighted in green and eData subjects, regardless if there is an EFL gain in a tracked subject. And they look like this. It's a spreadsheet format. Again, you can sort and filter, and hopefully that'll help in that area. But similarly, we have the scale score increase within level. It also is a query. You can sort and filter and get out of it whatever you need.
And Steve, real quick, while you're on that page, just looking at the reports page there, immediately above those 2 reports that you just shared with everyone is actually a query that I believe everyone currently has, the most recent assessment date. You can run that report, and this is just a quick reference back to what I was mentioning earlier about looking for lists of students whose assessment dates may be on the really kind of on the hairy edge of being able to be rolled over into next year. That's a report that you can run that should show you most recent assessment, which essentially does some filtering for you and will show you when the student's most recent assessment was, so that you can then evaluate if that student potentially would return or continue next year. Would you need to test them again at the start of the year to ensure that they have a valid pretest? So apologies for interrupting, Steve. I just wanted
problem.
to point that out while you were right there.
Yeah. And another change, a new button on the reports 2 page right up near the top. Attendance greater than 14 days. You had this report for quite a little while, but I added a raw data button, which just gives you the detailed information. You can see multiple lines for the same student. So it gives you a lot more information that you can dive into why maybe they are greater than 14 days.
Steve, there's a question in the chat.
Oh,
If you can't see it, I'll gladly read it for you. It's
I
related back to
can.
the. Yeah, it's about the scale score report does not show NRS gains, just changes in scale scores. Is that correct?
That is true. Just changes in scale scores.
So really, it's not that report is not for any official reporting. It's really just for a certain level of data curiosity, if you will, that if you are looking at your students at a much deeper, truly in the weeds level, and you want to see and evaluate if someone perhaps did not make a gain, which would be a separate report, but you want to see if they have improved their scale score, that's really a potential use for that report.
Right. These were all generated by requests from you all. So these are being used somewhere by someone. That's it for the reports 2 page changes. On the NRS page, this is a generic one, but all these raw data buttons, I added a new field, which is the keyword. So when you go and run these now, you will have something else to sort and filter on. In addition to, of course, we've had the sort selection by keyword, of course, available for a while, but this now adds that keyword over here. And we, Michael and I, really appreciate those of you that are really using your keywords the way that they were designed to be used with encoded intelligence in the keyword. It really makes your life easier. Then on the class group reports page, previous version, I added this new class attendance report, and now I've made it a class or group attendance report. And I have modified the drop down on the class key to include the instructor's last name and first name, just for informational purposes for now, so that you could, I know these are all blank, it's a scrub table, sorry. Just so you could kind of help you decide maybe which class you want to look at. And then when you select it, you are able to use the wildcard features here, which is I'll just review. If you erase the class key, you can put asterisks in here with any part of a combination of letters, which will then now also work down here with the class group attendance report. And remember that this start date and end date, if left blank, will run the entire year. But if you only want part of the year, you could start it here we're in the beginning, we're at the end of the year, you could start it like May 1st or something, and then it would just go from May 1st, and you can leave this blank. It always goes through the end of the whatever data you have. And these are all now functioning in this class group attendance report. And let's see, the last change was to this report right above here, the class group hours. Class group hours by month. Oh, right. This one was a very minor change. And I added some decimal points to the total class hours and the overall class hours. That was somebody needed a little more definition. So those are all The changes, there's a few other minor changes you'll find here and there, but nothing worth noting at this point. So any questions on the changes for version 3, which you will see very shortly? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat. Do you, Michael?
No, I think we're free and clear. So thank you, Steve. That's much appreciated, and looking forward to getting that out to all of you very soon. We'll stay on here for a handful of minutes if there's anybody that wants to kind of stay behind, so to speak, as others are leaving. That's all we have for you today. Again, we'll announce that new version of the template, and any other releases, they'll come out via our listserv. So of course, keep an eye out there for any important news between now and the end of the program year. So that's all we have for you. Have a great rest of the week.
Michael, it's Ruth again. Can I pick your brain?
Certainly.
Okay. I was looking at the report that you mentioned about the last assessment date. And I see that I can't filter it by exit date or by keyword.
Okay.
So how do you recommend, should I use, what report can I filter? Like, do you think I should just start with, like on the adult query? Like
yeah, so if you wanted to start from scratch, so to speak, and just see sort of raw data, if you will, the first page that Steve showed, that main page of the template, there is an adult assessments, which would literally list all the assessments that your individual took. And there should be a way to filter on the date field. And Steve, if you have a specific idea, correct me if I say anything wrong, but you should be able to filter on the date field, because Access should recognize that as a date field and should allow you to, I think there's some maximum, I think it would be min max. I forget the date field specific functions. Is it max or min in that field as well, where you want to look at, I think it might even say most recent, might be more descriptive than just min and max.
Yeah, here, I'll share my screen if you want.
Yeah, that would be awesome, because this is exactly what's on our mind right now, is making sure that students that we would potentially roll over in July would have an assessment that we could roll over with them, because we did miss people last year.
So it's the assessment date we're talking about, right?
Where did you start, Steve?
Oh,
Where did,
sorry. You're right. Adult assessments is the second to the last button under adult information on the main page of the template.
All right, I'm with you.
It takes you in here, and then I scrolled over about not very far, and there's the assessment date. So you can sort and filter with the down arrow, and it has really cool date filters. If you hover over date filter, you can do that. All this stuff. All dates in a period is way down here. You could pick fourth quarter. I mean, all sorts of stuff. Here, let's try fourth quarter.
Or before February the 1st.
Sure. Yeah, whatever works. Yeah, definitely. So that's really powerful. Dates are super powerful in Access. So,
and this one I can filter by exit date. Yes.
Exit date.
Date? No, it doesn't look like exit date is in this.
I don't think exit date's in this query.
Because that will, folks.
Exit date. Where is that stored again? Michael, do you remember? Is that part of the
it's program year details half, so to speak, part of the adult records.
Part of the adult details, you said?
Yeah. Well, adult, the demographics and from the adult table, and then program your details. It's in that table.
I mean,
So-
I love that this
Oh,
has
program year. Adult,
Yeah, I'm talking about the source table as program your details. It would be in query view
review
adult for
adult.
sure. Yeah.
Okay, so exit date should be in here, maybe way
I don't see it.
over first enrolled.
Yeah, it should be period of participation exit date.
Yeah, I think it's way over here somewhere, isn't it? Pop, here's pop something. Start date and then it must be after that, right? Oh, where did you go? Pop start.
I don't see it on this, guys.
I thought pop exit was in here.
If not, we can throw it in for version 3.
Pop, 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 pop. First enroll date.
Someone is saying before keyword on this street. Before keyword, no. All I have is first name, last name, keyword.
Here, pop. Pop exit date. It's actually right away in the first 15 fields.
Yeah, I figured. If
Pop
somebody
exit date
doesn't
then
close
is
with them.
maybe the field that would help you the most, Ruth.
Okay.
So that's in, I went to the main page and I clicked on the adults button. And that opens query view adult. And you can sort and filter from there.